You know, if it's not about sports, I find it very hard to concentrate.
Real quick, guys, I just want to say before I get started here, go subscribe to my second channel, Braden's Burner, because that's where I'll be posting if I ever get this channel completely banned, which I don't anticipate happening, but just in case it does, go subscribe. What's up, guys? Braden here, and today we are doing Dead Stadiums number 11, the subject being Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, Ohio, which housed the Reds and Bengals. The Cincinnati Reds baseball team had been playing at Crossley Field since 1912, and by the 1940s, city leaders in Cincinnati were discussing the possibility of building a new stadium for the Reds due to Crossley Field's aging structure and the fact that the area around the stadium had become downtrodden. But these talks would not get serious for another couple of decades, and that was because by the 60s, the city of Cincinnati was trying to get an expansion franchise in the American Football League, a startup league that was trying to rival the NFL in popularity. Let's talk for a minute about this guy named Paul Brown. He's relevant to the story, so just roll with me here. Paul Brown was the co-founder of the Cleveland Browns, an NFL franchise that was quite literally named in honor of him. He also coached them quite successfully, might I add. The Browns won NFL championships in 1950, 1954, and 1955 under Brown's coaching leadership. But in 1961, a man named Art Modell purchased the Browns franchise, and him and Paul Brown did not get along, to say the least. This led to Brown being fired from the team he founded, which happened in 1963. Out of spite, Brown decided to attempt to start his own team in Cincinnati. This all happened at the perfect time for the city of Cincinnati. The Reds wanted a new stadium, and the city, along with Paul Brown, wanted an expansion franchise in the AFL. And so, Paul Brown used this as a bargaining chip for the AFL to grant him a franchise, which they did. Paul Brown named his new team the Bengals, a nod to a previous professional football team in Cincinnati of the same name, and gave them the same color scheme as the Browns. So this dude was definitely trolling, before trolling was even a thing. Some may call him the original troll. Funding was approved and the location was chosen. It was going to be right on the banks of the Ohio River, and because of that, the name Riverfront Stadium was chosen. A groundbreaking ceremony was held on February 1st, 1968, and the stadium was finished by June of 1970, just in time for the Reds to begin playing there midway through the 1970 MLB season. The stadium cost a total of $44 million, well under the $50 million budget. The playing surface was originally AstroTurf, and the venue consisted of 4 tiers of multicolored seats. The stadium was designed to easily transform from a baseball configuration to a football one, with the lower field box seats from home plate all the way up the left field foul line being put on tracks in order to easily be moved and make room for a football field. The first ever event at Riverfront Stadium was a Reds game, an 8-2 loss to the Atlanta Braves on June 30th, 1970. Hank Aaron of the Braves hit the first ever home run in Riverfront Stadium history that day, which was a 2-run shot in the first inning. And just 2 weeks later, on July 14th, 1970, the MLB All-Star Game was held there, which is often remembered for a home plate collision between Reds superstar Pete Rose and Cleveland Indians catcher Ray Foss. The Bengals would play their first regular season game at Riverfront Stadium that fall, on September 20th, 1970, which was against the Oakland Raiders and attended by over 60,000 fans. The Bengals won 31-21, which was a good start to regular season football at the new venue. However, the preseason opener at Riverfront Stadium, a game between the Bengals and the Washington Redskins, did not go quite as smoothly. The game took place on August 8th, 1970, and it was nothing short of a disaster. The Bengals sold seats to this game that were not even ready in time for kickoff. Here's what happened. On August 2nd, 1970, the Reds beat the Cubs 4-3 in extra innings and would not play there again until after the Bengals' first preseason game on August 8th. So the crew working for Riverfront Stadium had almost a week to switch it. And the seats were on tracks, so it should be easy, right? Well, not so fast, my friend. They botched it badly. Due to a miscommunication and infighting about who would be the ones to dismantle the outfield fence and actually move the seats, 60 workers went on strike. They completely walked out on the job. A district court judge ended up ordering the workers back to the job site. However, by the time they got back to the job site, they were already days behind schedule. And considering the fact that this was the very first time ever that Riverfront Stadium was being converted from one configuration to another, those days that the workers spent refusing to work really hurt. And so, in the end, the stadium was not ready, not even close. 9 whole sections of movable seats were not, well, moved. So that means a total of 360 people who purchased a ticket were left not being able to attend the game, which doesn't seem like a lot, but just imagine you purchased tickets to an NFL game and then we're told actually no, your seats aren't ready. In addition to that disaster, a much smaller conflict occurred when the Reds insisted on painting portions of the AstroTurf infield brown to appear as if it was dirt. The Bengals were not thrilled about this and they wanted a completely green field. However, the Reds ended up winning this debate. So already the two tenants at Riverfront Stadium were bickering, and the shared stadium had only been open for just over a month by this point. This simmering tension between the two clubs would eventually get worse, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. Riverfront Stadium would host the Fall Classic in its very first season in operation, but the Reds would lose the World Series to the Baltimore Orioles 4-1, and the Reds' only win in that series didn't even come at Riverfront Stadium. Nonetheless, the fact that Riverfront Stadium hosted 2 World Series games in its first year of existence is pretty cool. The Bengals also enjoyed success in 1970, going 8-6, which was their first winning season in franchise history, which at that point was just 3 seasons old. They also made the playoffs for the first time, but lost that playoff game on the road against the Baltimore Colts by a score of 17-0. The Reds, which in the 1970s were given the nickname the Big Red Machine, won back-to-back World Series titles in 1975 and 1976. Previously, they had not won a World Series since 1940. The Big Red Machine had numerous star players, some of whom are considered all-time greats in the sport of baseball. They boasted star power such as Joe Morgan, Pete Rose, Ken Griffey Sr., and Tony Perez, among others. On January 10, 1982, Riverfront Stadium was the site of the AFC Championship between the Bengals and the San Diego Chargers, which came to be known as the Freezer Bowl. The air temperature during the game was -9, but the wind chill was reported to be an astounding -59. The game is looked back on today as one of the coldest NFL games ever. Ultimately, despite the cold temperatures, the Bengals would prevail against the Chargers and move on to the Super Bowl, which luckily was held indoors that season. The Bengals also hosted the 1988 AFC Championship, which they won against the Buffalo Bills. Also in 1988, Riverfront Stadium was the site of Reds pitcher Tom Browning's perfect game. It occurred during a 1-0 victory against the Los Angeles Dodgers on September 16, 1988, and at the time it was one of only 12 total perfect games in MLB history. Browning was so good that day that a remarkable 70 of 102 total pitches were strikes, and he never threw more than 2 balls on any single pitch count. Riverfront Stadium was not just the site of great feats of athleticism and iconic sports moments though. Several well-known musical acts held concerts there, including but not limited to the Eagles, the Rolling Stones, George Strait, and NSYNC. Another interesting thing about Riverfront Stadium is that the Bengals defeated every NFL team there at least once, and went undefeated against the following teams at Riverfront Stadium: Cardinals, Giants, and Eagles. Another interesting thing about the Bengals' tenure there was the fact that they used minimal markings. The Bengals didn't paint the end zones, nor utilize the use of a logo at center field until the late 90s. However, Riverfront Stadium nonetheless gained a reputation as a tough place to play for visiting NFL teams, and during the 1988 Super Bowl run, it was nicknamed The Jungle. The song Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses became the Bengals' theme song, often playing at home games. During that 1988 NFL season, the Bengals were undefeated at Riverfront. But professional football wouldn't be the only football played there. The Cincinnati Bearcats college football team also played 25 total games at Riverfront, including hosting number 1 ranked Penn State there in 1985. The Bearcats also played all home games in 1990 at Riverfront Stadium, while their normal venue, Nippert Stadium, was undergoing renovations. Now, it's no secret that the Bengals and Reds didn't always get along, but by the 90s, both clubs were very publicly attempting to get support from city officials to build their own separate stadiums. Bengals president Mike Brown threatened to move the team if the Bengals did not get their own stadium. A compromise was reached whereby Riverfront Stadium would undergo football upgrades. However, the Reds felt a little bit jealous and slighted that the Bengals would get to improve their football version of Riverfront, while the Reds' baseball version wouldn't get any improvements. This, of course, led to more fighting between the two clubs, which only further proved the need for 2 distinct stadiums. On June 28, 1995, funding was approved via a 5-4 city council vote for the Bengals to build a new stadium. On September 10, 1996, the Bengals reached an agreement for a 30-year lease for a new stadium. and the new stadium, called at the time Paul Brown Stadium, opened on August 19, 2000. The Bengals played their final game at Riverfront Stadium on December 12, 1999, which was a 44-28 victory over the Cleveland Browns. Also in 1996, Riverfront Stadium was renamed Synergy Field after the company Synergy paid $6 million for the naming rights. 2 years later, in 1998, the Reds announced they would begin building a new stadium that would be partially on the same site, which means construction would start while the Reds continued to play there. To make construction easier, 14,000 seats had to be removed, and the bullpens had to be relocated as well. The Reds also replaced the AstroTurf with natural grass, which made Riverfront Stadium / Synergy Field look like a modern ballpark for a change. Reds fans no longer had to stare at empty football seats that sat beyond the outfield fence and instead got a nice view of the Ohio River. It was also interesting because in those final years that the Reds played at Riverfront, a 40-foot wall was installed in deep center field to prevent easy home runs, which fans nicknamed the Black Monster, a play on the Green Monster moniker the Boston Red Sox use for their outfield wall. The Reds played their final game at Riverfront Stadium on September 22, 2002, a 4-3 loss to the Philadelphia Phillies. The Reds' new home, Great American Ballpark, opened the following year on March 31, 2003. Riverfront Stadium / Synergy Field was officially demolished via implosion on December 29, 2002. The entire thing came down in 37 seconds. People on both sides of the Ohio River watched the implosion, as well as people parked alongside the John A. Roebling Suspension Bridge, which goes all the way to Covington, Kentucky. 3 blocks away at Paul Brown Stadium, Bengals fans cheered as Riverfront Stadium / Synergy Field crumbled into dust. The implosion did not do any damage to Great American Ballpark, and the demolition was by all measures a success. Riverfront Stadium may have been a cookie-cutter stadium, but it was far from ordinary. From the Reds winning back-to-back World Series titles in 75 and 76, to the Freezer Bowl, to Tom Browning's perfect game, Riverfront has experienced quite a bit of sports history. The demise ultimately was that the two teams that shared Riverfront wanted their own space. And who could blame them? Multi-purpose stadiums were no longer in vogue by that point, and many teams realized having to share space was not worth the money it may have saved. But in the end, Riverfront, although a dead stadium, lives on in memories, old footage, and stories from years past. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you hated it, leave a dislike. But either way, comment for the algorithm. Peace out.
Never ever find the right words, and there's no way this is real life. There's no telling you're the right girl, so I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right.